element is a language. So first thing first, let's get into the properties and let's get into the mechanism of how these elements work. So we got four elements, which is fire, water, air, and earth. And then we have ether. So ether kind of corresponds to our spirit, our space, and our perimeter that's utilizing these elements and these alchemies to be able to create imaginations and visions and things of those natures. So what I mean by each element is a language of its own. Let's look at fire. So we're going to start off with fire. Fire is the spark of an imagination. So fire is the frequency before it starts to vibrate the thought, before it has any accumulation to it. So once we look at fire, we can kind of see that fire isn't in this realm. And we have three different modalities of fire, which is cardinal fire, fixed fire, and mutable fire. So the properties of cardinal fire is like the initiation of a thought. So the initiation of a frequency, the initiation of the smokeless, flameless, smokeless, non-flammable, odorless gas. Fixated fire is kind of correlated more towards the substantiation and the sustainability of that fire, the sustainability of that imagination and that vision. Mutable fire kind of corresponds to the relativity and how that fire can be added on to others people's fire and kind of seeing where other people's imaginations and visions is coming from. So it can kind of come to a more broader conclusion or be able to be relatable and changeable or an add-on to whatever imagination and vision is being communicated at those times. So when looking at these fire, let's get into fire. When looking at these fire elements, fire kind of taps us into the space, which puts us in a certain temperament, which we start to externalize and creates the temperature. So kind of understanding how temperament plays out and kind of understanding the oral tradition. Oral tradition is understanding the word before it was, chopped into consonants and chopped into, language, and being able to decipher, just being able to understand the vibe of what's actually being portrayed in front of us, what's being externalized. So we can all understand each other and we all have our own language. But when it comes to humanity has a language that offspring from us traveling the sun positions and calculating the sun positions in the phases of the suns, because when it comes to us interacting with those atmospheres and those natures playing out as below, this kind of put us in a space of kind of understanding and coming up with our perspectives and views on what's actually playing out in nature and how those natures are in fact affecting us as below. So when it comes to certain positions of the sun, that puts us in a certain state of being, which puts us in a certain temperament, which produces our temperature. So let's look at springtime. Let's use springtime for an example. Going through that seasonal transition of spring, starting off with cardinal fire, this is where we start to see grass grow. This is where we start to see nature starting to become into fruition. So this kind of puts us in the energy of being able to view that alchemy and being able to encapsulate that alchemy into the 1, 2, and 3rd dimension and kind of come up with ideas of how things is being birthed. So this is why Aries season, the springtime, is correlated to cardinal fire. And what is fire? The imagination, the vision, the spark of something, the frequency before it starts to vibrate. So getting into the fire and the language of fire, being able to understand this oral tradition before actually, having to utilize so much logic and linguistics to be able to see where something is coming from. This kind of puts us in the space of understanding the language of God and understanding understanding the language of angels and demons. So once we kind of understand the alchemy and understand the elements, then we can kind of see how these energy signatures are playing out as below through our natures and our characteristics. So looking at cardinal fire, since it's the birth of something new, the birth of fire, the spark of an imagination, that puts us in the temperament of kind of wanting to have some form of passion behind whatever we're trying to initiate into this reality, having some form of passion and intention behind whatever we're trying to initiate into this realm of reality as well. So we can kind of see individuals playing out those natures as above, just observing these individuals or just observing our surroundings from a distance and seeing how the natures is playing out as below, as above, as below. and see how people are playing out these characters and these natures without actually having to, use any form of logic or rationality to actually communicate what's actually going on with this person that's unseen, because these things play out as above first in a more lighter realm, and then once that condense and then implode, it becomes our adrenaline, because we created ourselves as within, so without, that floated up into the atmosphere, became the lighter particle, and an accumulation that us doing that teamwork makes the dream work, that became our first condensing and implosion mechanism that we kind of utilize to kind of come out of the waters. And once we came out of those waters, hopping into those forms and those mentalities from atmosphere to atom and to parasite, bug, and human, which we are now, that kind of gave us the ability and intellectual property to be able to understand these natures and just see how these things are, kind of how we are these things, and how we are utilizing these things to kind of convey each other's messages by just combining our atmospheres, our vibes, our frequency, and our vibrations. So you can have somebody that's like, you don't know this person from a grain of salt, but you could just observe this individual from a distance. Just let's say that we're going through the cardinal portion of spring. You can observe this person from a distance and kind of see that this person is acting out characters and natures of being passionate or being aggressive towards something. That's you saying that their state of being and their temperament is, they're in that space of, dealing with some fire energies, some passionate energy, some aggressiveness energy, some energy that deals with, wanting to give birth to something new. So that plays out on all three levels when it comes to, cardinal fire, fixated fire, and mutable fire, making that trinity. So when it comes to cardinal fire, that's how the natures of cardinal fire, and that's how that cardinal fire language is expressed through our body and our characteristics. And then we also have not mutable, but fixated fire. So this is the fixated portion of summertime. So getting into the fixated portion of the summertime, we can kind of see these natures and these characteristics play out when it comes to us being a little bit more, dealing with more of our self and dealing with more of our self-expressions, and not really dealing with so much of trying to initiate a new vision. It's kind of that vision has been accumulated, and now that vision is something that we can kind of substantiate and we can kind of fixate ourselves into. So when it comes to us fixating ourselves into that vision, when it being us interacting with that atmosphere, us interacting with that sun that's being produced, it puts us in a certain state of being, a certain temperament, and then we start to externalize and we see that temperature play out in reality. But that temperament is what's kind of producing our results. So that temperament is going to be more correlated around things that deals with our self-expressions and being able to have our own way of seeing and feeling about a circumstance or a situation. So once we see individuals playing out more of those characters and those natures as below, we can kind of understand how that language and how to kind of communicate with those energy signatures without actually having to utilize some form of logic, because this is going to be taking us back to the original starting point of us understanding oral tradition and kind of mapping out the sun transitions and breaking it down into continents and being able to, create a language from these things. So this can take us to a space to understand how to create a language from ourselves and come up with some sign, sigil, or talisman, or crystal or gem, however you want to do it, and be able to utilize that to kind of help you represent the state of being that you are in. So when it comes to that fixated fire energy is going to be putting us in a state of being, temperament, to be producing the results, temperature that deals with our self-expressions, where we like to entertain, get into that fifth house area, that Leo space area, the Yalda Bell. And then we also have mutable fire. So with mutable fire, that's going to be completing this trinity of the fire energy. This is going to be us being able to separate from the rest of the fire and kind of see where we can add on or play out as an addition, because mutable is about changing and adapting. So this is going to be making us understand the language or the intellectual property of what we need to change or what we need to adapt to when it comes to our vision and the other people's visions that's surrounding us, that can kind of put us in the space of coming up with a broad philosophical point of view. So with us in this space, in this temperament state of being, producing these results, temperature, what's being externalized is us kind of having some form of wisdom or having some form of knowledge when it comes to what's actually being communicated but what's unsaid, because these natures are just playing out through our character at the moment. So this is going to be us, understanding how to interact and understanding the language of angels and demons, and this can kind of help you filter through what somebody is portraying to you. This can kind of help you filter through the verbal communication and kind of go to that space and location and area where this information is getting derived from. So you will be able to see all the shapes and forms and the creatures and the characters that can get derived out of that space. So that's how you can kind of utilize fire, and how fire has its language of its own, because it always taps us into the state of being of dealing with something that deals with our visions, our passions, anger or aggressiveness and spiciness. So fire is like the frequency before it starts to vibrate. So this is like the initiation of the thought. So let's get into water. Water is the accumulation. So once it cools down, we can kind of be into that. That's an accumulation of something. So fire, the initiation of a thought. Water, the accumulation of a thought. So with water tapping us into memory, tapping us into the subconscious, tapping us into something that we can confine into, this is us becoming the womb and responding to that womb, or responding to that shape and form that we just created, giving birth to it for the first time, having a point of reference. So the language of water is always going to put us in a state of being, or in a temperament of producing results that deals with wanting to connect, wanting to confine, wanting to relate, or being emotional, or that hopping into that image. That image, fire, started to give it a vibration, emotion. That image in motion, being emotional. So that's the language of water. So when it comes to water, we have 3 different modalities of water, which all plays out as different transitions of the sun. So we have cardinal water. What is cardinal water? Cardinal water is Cancer. So this is initiative, taking initiative, or initiating a vibe, initiating a feeling or an emotion, because we know that water deals with the vibration. So with us initiating a vibration, this can come across as strong currents, strong vibrations, strong energy frequencies that we have to react and respond to, because it puts us in that state of being that we can also connect to. So this also gives us the ability of caring as well. So if we just see somebody as below, plan out those natures as above, because that condense and implode and become our actions. Well, that condense and implode and become our actions via the waters above, and synchronicity with the waters below, the way that we are, structured, the way that we structured our bodies, the way that our blood and the way that our plasma and the way that our organs is interacting with each other is in the same way, because we have these natures, these human natures that we are aware of, and we have our higher celestial natures that's in sync with the natures that that we are experiencing in the 1, 2, and 3rd dimension. So when it comes to the water element and how this language is portrayed via nonverbal communication, and just understand it from an oral tradition standpoint, before we started to chop it up into continents and create languages and scribes and hieroglyphics around these things, this kind of puts us in a space of knowing when these seasonal transitions are playing out as above in the sky, then these are the natures that we're going to be seeing, humans and animals and bugs and things of those natures how those things are going to start to interact and relate to each other. It's going to put us in a more emotional, want it to be more into our own world type of energy. So when it comes to, you see a person playing out these characters as below, then you can kind of tell if this person, the way this spirit is moving, if this person is a water sign. So this can kind of help you understand how we have each how these things plays out as like a intuition or a stimuli that we get aroused by. But these things aren't as these things are just we just utilize these things as vehicles, because just inhabiting these things, giving life to these things, giving these things a pulse, and wanting to experience these things. That's how we kind of created these things in the first place. And then let's get into so we got cardinal water. Now let's get into the fixated portion of the water. So this is like an iceberg. This is like the water that's sustained, that's concealed, that's in a stagnant or stuck position. So when it comes to being able to observe characters that plays out and this type of vibrational energy signature, this is going to be you kind of being able to decipher what kind of energy signature that you're kind of communicating with. So, or this can be the energy signature that you are in, that you're trying to relate to, or that you're trying to express to let people know your vibration or your vibe about something, or how you feel about something. So with fixated water, this is going to be the concealed water. So this is going to be the water that's frozen, that's beneath the surface. So it's frozen like an iceberg. So you may come across individual that's you try to get these people to open up, but it's kind of like hard to get this individual to open up. It's kind of trying to get this individual to open up. It's trying to like you trying to open up a concealed pickle jar or something like that. So it's like real hard to get these individuals to open up, so you can kind of understand the type of state of being or the temperament that this person is kind of in at the moment. They may be dealing with some heavy Scorpio energies in their chart. They may be dealing with some, they may be a Scorpio themselves. They may have some heavy Martian energy in their chart or something like that. So it's kind of hard to get these people to open up. So you got to kind of understand these alchemies and how these alchemies play out through our characters and our natures as below, so that it kind of produces what we are externalizing and what we are being aware of in the 1, 2, and 3rd dimension. Turn this air back on for phone get that hot. No, we good. It's hot. Summertime, Sumerian time. And then we also have mutable water. So when getting into the energy vibration of mutable water, this is going to be us understanding this intellectual property of having to the mutable portion of this seasonal transition. So this is going to be getting us into the death portion of the seasonal transition. So fixated water is going to be dealing more with the fall portion of the seasonal transition, and cardinal water is going to be dealing more with the summer portion of these seasonal transitions. So let's get back into Pisces, which is the mutable portion of these seasonal transitions. So understanding the language of Pisces, this is going to be dealing more with the subconscious, more with things that goes on in the subconscious realm, in the yin realm. And keep in mind that water also deals with our yin realm, because that's going to be symbolizing us soaking into something, soaking into that imagination, so that we can nurture it. So once we soak into that imagination, once we soak into that image, this kind of taps us into the yin realm, and this is how we develop that concept as well. So mutable water, this is going to be the subconscious. So this is going to be tapping us more into the things that deals with what's not into this reality, what we can't see, what's unseen, and being sensitive to those type of energies and those light forms and those forms of information as well. So that mutable water is what's going to be putting us in a space of wanting to connect more to our dreams, our imaginations, and also just with our spirituality and our broad philosophical points of views, because that's getting more into astrology, because that deals with Jupiterian energy as well. But understanding these are going to be the natures that an individual is going to be expressing as below, because these are going to be how their minds and how they're going to be interacting and utilizing their minds and their spaceships and their mentalities, creating thoughts and feelings, Adams and Eves, to express as below. They can kind of plays out as their personification or their characteristics or their mannerisms down here. So if you just come across a person that's like really into like spirituality and things of those natures, they like to be like into like spiritual things, they like to do things that deals with art, creativity, dreams, imaginations, and fantasies, 9 times out of 10 you're dealing with a Pisces. So that's how you can kind of understand that type of individual without actually having to go through the process of, having to communicate it, or, just opening up your throat chakra and wanting to, get to know this person. You can just like observe a person from an esoteric perspective and kind of understand their natures, and when they're acting out of their natures, or when they're not acting accordingly to their natures and things of those natures. So that's like kind of understanding the oral tradition before we got into making languages and making hieroglyphics of these things, because we was observing these sun transitions, and when the sun was in that specific position and distance, these was the characters that we was planning out as below. And now let's get into air. So air is the interaction between that fire and that water. So that lighter particle interacting with the heavier particle, because the lighter particle represents the fire before it accumulates and become the heavier particle, the emotion, the image in motion. So we got the image and the image in motion. We got the gas, then we got the liquid. So the air kind of provides us with the transportation through both of these things simultaneously, so we can hop in and out of both of these properties and both of these alchemies, so we can be able to rationalize and calculate how to kind of move in the esoteric realm, or where to direct something. So air is always going to be giving us a form of direction, so we can kind of utilize this to think and communicate. So when looking at the air element, this always going to tap us into the state of being and the temperament of wanting to think and communicate, or gain more information, or collect more data about a person, place, or thing, whatever we're invested into at the moment. So when it comes to the air energy is always going to be, putting us in the space of, wanting to think and communicate. So first we have mutable air. So with us, being receptive to mutable air, this is going to be the transportation, and seeing how we can relate this to a collective, or be able to be adjustable and adaptable to the way that others are thinking and communicating. So just understanding this space and understanding how this elemental, magic works, this can kind of put us in a space of being able to utilize this to see what forms of informations and what conversations we need to be engaging into. Because if these conversations and informations don't got nothing to do that we're familiar with, then we may not need to engage with that person, place, or thing that's conveying these ideas. So air is always going to be, making us come up with ideas and logic, and this kind of taps us into, creating and chopping up the continents from the right brain perspective, from the yin perspective, and wanted to, see these things externally. So this is where when we was creating languages, we was in that space of wanting to create signs and symbols and intellectual properties to kind of represent these characters that we see playing out, that we don't have words yet to explain. So utilizing air can kind of, help us chop up these what's going on in nature, and being able to stamp a name or a title on it, so that we can create some form of, law, or create some form of logic, or some form of linguistics, because it deals with the logic and latitude and longitude, Luciferian lizard types of energies. So this understanding the mutable air qualities, this is going to be us wanting to be relatable and mutable and adjustable to our own and other ways of thinking and being practical, and seeing where we need to add on something, or seeing what we need to kind of detach or sacrifice, because this is going to be the ending portion of spring, so the death portion of spring. And then we also have the cardinal fire. So when it comes to cardinal fire, this is going to be wanting to initiate a new way of thinking and communicating. So if you see an individual that plays out these characters and these natures below, of always wanting to initiate some form of communication or way of thinking that can lead to us being diplomatics and having some form of diplomacy, this may be a person that we kind of characterize and give names and titles to when it comes to their zodiac as a Libra. So when it comes to, us wanting to, communicate, but be more initiative, wanting to spark our own ideas that can kind of point individuals in the right directions, and give people a form or a sense of directions on how we need to be participating and acting out when it comes to that being our personification, when it comes to the way that we're going about our manners and our mannerisms. these are the types of individuals or people that's in this character that's going to be producing these results externally, that's going to be, dealing with cardinal error, creating and initiating a new way of thinking and being practical. So initiating forms of communication. And then we'll also have fixated error. So this is going to be the detached air. So this is going to be like an air pocket that's separated from the rest of the air, because this is going to be the dead portion of the air. So this is going to, well, it's going to be the dead portion of the air, because the seasonal transition that this is taking place in, it's going to be dealing with, the death when we're experiencing those seasons of seeing things die, seeing things get cold, seeing things be detached. So, playing out those natures as below, these are going to be the energies that we're going to be expressing. So these are going to be our temperament, and then this is what's going to be producing our results. We actually see that temperature playing out in nature of things being cold. So we may be a little bit more cold, we may be a little bit more detached, we may be a little bit more isolated during these times. So just understanding how that energy signature kind of works, and us being into our own air pocket, understanding that from a oral traditional standpoint, we can kind of see how things in nature are playing out these characters as well. So that's air. Now let's get into earth. So we got fire, the initiation of a thought; water, the accumulation of a thought; air, the transportation of a thought; and earth, the formation of a thought. So this is where we get to see things settle down. We get to see the results of what we have been creating from an esoteric perspective, when utilizing our alchemies, when utilizing our fire, water, air, and earth, and actually see the expiration of these things, actually see these things materialize. So earth deals with materialization. Earth deals with seeing something being grounded, or seeing things practical, or seeing the matter, because what was making matter in the fourth, fifth, and sixth dimension, giving our life to, we see that becoming matter in the 1, 2, and 3rd dimension. So when it comes to understanding the language of earth, observing our individual, or just observing nature and how natures are playing out as above so below, in a type of state of being that these natures are putting us in, to put us in so we can develop our temperament around ourselves. And this is going to be us playing out these characters of being a little bit more practical, being a little bit more rational, wanting to see the results of something before actually participating with something. So this is what gives earth signs, and this is why people categorize earth signs as being materialistic, because it's going to be dealing with the material and what's materialized. So understanding that nature from an esoteric perspective, and seeing how these things are playing out in nature, and seeing how humans and animals and bugs and parasites are playing out these natures as below as well, this kind of puts us in a perspective of understanding the kind of seasonal transition that we're going through, and what we need to be aware of, and how to be aware of these energies from an esoteric perspective. So we have fixated earth. So when it comes to fixated earth, this is like the anchoring of the earth elements. So this is like the fixated portion of the earth elements. This is like the stable, the brick of something that doesn't move, that doesn't budge. It's like being able to maintain a position, being able to maintain a sense of status, being able to maintain, something that deals with longevity and patience as well. So just being in that temperament, being in that state of being, these are going to be the types of thoughts and feelings that we're going to be developing for ourselves, to kind of utilize as spaceships to sustain ourselves through that astral travel that we're currently going through. So, interacting with that sun, interacting with that atmosphere, or interacting with that hot cloud, well, interacting with that atmosphere, this is going to be the state of being that we're all going to be in. We're all going to be wanting to be a little bit more patient. And this is also once we see these natures playing out as below, we start to see things grow into nature as well. So we start to see fruits grow. We start to see trees grow. Things coming to life. Things starting to be a little bit more fruitful. The times is starting to be a little bit more fruitful. So understanding how these natures are playing out, this is kind of help us understand, how to have the right starting point when looking at how language was developed in the first place, going back before they created the oral traditions or created the hieroglyphics. Because right now, when it comes to us speaking English and things of those natures, we're just, expressing a updated version, or more structured version of what we was doing 2,000 years ago before we created a language. Because before we had a language to kind of help us or give us some form of structure, we was just, you know, acting out these characters purely. It was just like acting out these characters in this pure state of being, like something that we can see animals doing, because animals have their own language as well. Just get into the psyche of an animal, and into the psyche of an animal, you don't have to tell birds and squirrels when to hibernate, because they're just observing the energies that's going on around them. They're observing the environment that's going on around them. So this brings us back to the starting point of what we was doing 2,000 years ago before we created this language of what was going on. So this kind of gave us the intelligence of, you know, the sun is playing a role that, you know, that's playing out, and that's, you know, affecting all of us on a broad scale. So that was fixated earth. So now we got mutable earth. So mutable earth is the mutable portion of summertime. So when it comes to us interacting with the mutable portion of summertime, this is us getting ready to, you know, harvest things, because what we have grown, the fruits that we have grown, the fruits that we have to bear, now we can harvest these things. Now we can kind of pick these things. Now we can see if these things are right. Now we can take these things and use these things as a form of safety and shelter before we go into the fall portion of, you know, this seasonal transition. So when it comes to the mutable portion, this is going to be putting us into the state of being of kind of worrying if we've been planting the right seeds, or working on planting the right seeds, or, you know, upholding some form of consistency when it comes to the seeds that we have been planting ever since the birth of that imagination or that vision that we had in every season, so that we can start to, you know, see these things accumulate into nature. So now we have something to kind of help us, that we can kind of uphold, to utilize as a form of safety and shelter. And then get into the cardinal portion of the seasonal transition. So the cardinal portion of this seasonal transition deals with Capricorn. So when going into Capricorn, this is going to be the death portion of, you know, the winter time. So this is us from springtime, seeing the fruit grow in nature, summertime, harvesting that death time, having something to stand on, having something that can represent and give us a form of sense of security when it comes to the status about something. Like, this is something that we've been upholding. This is something that we've been maintaining. So now this is something that we can stand on and keep us shielded, or keep us with having a good sufficient canopy going through the winter, going through the coldness, so we won't get so cold. So understanding those temperaments kind of puts us in the space of wanting to be a little bit more about our business, wanting to be a little bit more about our reputation and our popularity and what we're known for, and things of those natures. So those are how these energies, signatures, play out in reality, from us creating these things from an esoteric perspective, just becoming aware and creating minds for ourselves. So we have fire, water, air, and earth. So this is going to be taking individuals out of, you know, the cliche term of fire, water, and earth, and kind of going to that space and being able to see it from its purest form, and see how we're doing these things on a day-to-day basis when it comes to our thoughts and our imaginations and our visions. But yeah, it's been Eli 360. Hope you enjoyed the video. Peace.